Welcome to Moments in History channel. In the grand tapestry of medieval history, few figures shine as brightly as Saladin. Revered by his own people and respected by his enemies, he was a leader whose name became synonymous with chivalry, military genius, and unwavering honor. But who was the man behind the legend? How did a Kurdish boy from Tikrit rise to become the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, uniting the Muslim world and challenging the mighty Crusader states? Today, we unravel the extraordinary life of Saladin, a conqueror known as much for his mercy as for his might. Born as Ṣalāḥ ad-Dīn Yūsuf ibn Ayyūb around the year 1137, Saladin's journey began not in a palace, but in the rugged landscapes of Mesopotamia. His family was of Kurdish noble descent, serving the powerful Seljuk Turkish dynasty. From a young age, Saladin was immersed in a world of political intrigue and military strategy. His father, Najm ad-Din Ayyūb, and his uncle Shirkuh were skilled commanders and politicians, and it was under their guidance that the young Saladin received his education. He wasn't just trained in warfare. He studied theology, law, and poetry, developing a deep piety that would guide his actions throughout his life. His early career wasn't marked by any particular ambition for power. He preferred scholarly pursuits to the battlefield. However, destiny had other plans. In the 1160s, Saladin accompanied his uncle Shirkuh on a series of military campaigns into Egypt. At the time, Egypt was ruled by the faltering Fatimid Caliphate, a Shia dynasty whose internal weakness made it a tempting prize for both the Sunni forces of Nur ad-Dīn, the ruler of Syria, and the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem. These campaigns were Saladin's trial by fire. He learned firsthand about siege warfare, battlefield tactics, and the complex web of alliances that defined the era. After his uncle Shirkuh masterfully seized control of Egypt and became its vizier, he died unexpectedly just 2 months later. In a surprising turn of events, the young and relatively inexperienced Saladin was chosen as his successor in 1169. Many saw him as a pliable figurehead they could easily control. They couldn't have been more wrong. Saladin quickly proved to be a shrewd and decisive leader. He consolidated his power, rooted out internal conspiracies, and began to reform Egypt's military and economy. By 1171, he felt secure enough to take a momentous step. He officially abolished the Fatimid Caliphate and declared allegiance to the Sunni Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. With this single act, Saladin brought Egypt back into the Sunni fold and established his own dynasty, the Ayyubids. Now the Sultan of Egypt, Saladin's ambition grew. He saw himself as the unifier of the Islamic world, tasked with a sacred duty to drive the Crusaders out of the Holy Land and reclaim Jerusalem. His mentor, Nur ad-Din, had long championed this cause, and upon Nur ad-Din's death in 1174, Saladin saw his opportunity to inherit that mantle. He marched into Syria, not just as a conqueror, but as the rightful successor to Nur ad-Din's mission. Over the next decade, through a brilliant combination of diplomacy, political maneuvering, and military campaigns, Saladin painstakingly unified Muslim territories from Egypt through Syria and into Mesopotamia. He wasn't just building an empire, he was forging a single, powerful front against the Crusader states, which had been entrenched in the Levant for nearly a century. His strategy was one of patience and precision. He understood that a direct assault on the powerful kingdom of Jerusalem would be foolish. Instead, he encircled it, slowly chipping away at its territories and isolating it from potential allies. He made truces when it suited him and waged war when he had the advantage. All the while, he was building a formidable, disciplined army, inspired by his leadership and the call for jihad, or holy struggle, to liberate sacred lands. The year 1187 marked the culmination of all his efforts. Saladin had managed to provoke the Crusaders into open battle by laying siege to the city of Tiberias. Guy de Lusignan, the king of Jerusalem, gathered the largest Crusader army ever assembled and marched out to meet him. It was a fatal mistake. On a scorching July day, near the twin hills known as the Horns of Hattin, Saladin executed a tactical masterpiece. He lured the heavily armored Crusader knights into an arid, waterless plain, harassing them with his mounted archers and cutting off their access to the Sea of Galilee, their only source of water. By the next day, The Crusader army was exhausted, dehydrated, and demoralized. Saladin's forces surrounded them and closed in. The Battle of Hattin was not a battle. It was an annihilation. The Crusader army was shattered. The true cross, their most sacred relic, was captured. King Guy himself was taken prisoner. In a single stroke, Saladin had broken the back of Crusader military power in the Holy Land. The path to Jerusalem was now open. News of the victory at Hattin sent shockwaves across both the Islamic and Christian worlds. For Muslims, it was a moment of ecstatic triumph, a sign of divine favor. For Christians, it was a catastrophe of biblical proportions. Following his victory, Saladin moved swiftly. City after city fell to his forces: Acre, Sidon, Beirut. Finally, he stood before the walls of the ultimate prize, Jerusalem. The city had been in Christian hands for 88 years, ever since its brutal capture during the First Crusade, which was marked by a horrific massacre of its Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. The defenders of Jerusalem prepared for a similar fate. They expected no mercy. But Saladin was not a man driven by vengeance. After a brief siege, the city's defenders negotiated a surrender. What happened next would cement Saladin's legendary status. Instead of a slaughter, Saladin offered terms of incredible magnanimity. He allowed the city's Christian inhabitants to ransom themselves and leave peacefully. Those who couldn't afford the ransom were, in many cases, pardoned by Saladin and his commanders, who paid the fee out of their own pockets. He protected the city's holy sites, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and ensured that order was maintained. This act of mercy stood in stark contrast to the bloodshed of 1099, and earned Saladin the admiration of even his European chroniclers. He was seen not as a barbarian, but as a noble and chivalrous sovereign. The fall of Jerusalem, however, was not the end of the story. The shock of its loss prompted the Pope to call for a new crusade, the Third Crusade, which would be led by the most powerful kings in Europe. Among them was the legendary warrior king of England, Richard the Lionheart. The stage was set for an epic clash of titans, a duel between two of the most iconic figures of the Middle Ages. The conflict between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart is the stuff of legend. From 1189 to 1192, they engaged in a grueling war of attrition. Richard, a brilliant military tactician in his own right, managed to recapture the key port city of Acre after a long and brutal siege. He then marched his army down the coast, fending off Saladin's constant attacks and winning a hard-fought victory at the Battle of Arsuf. Yet, despite his successes on the battlefield, Richard could never land a decisive blow. He twice marched his army to within sight of Jerusalem, but each time he was forced to turn back, realizing that even if he could capture the city, he couldn't possibly hold it. Throughout this intense conflict, a strange and remarkable sense of mutual respect developed between the two leaders. Stories, perhaps embellished over time, tell of their chivalrous exchanges. When Richard fell ill with a fever, Saladin reportedly sent him fresh fruit and snow from the mountains to cool him. When Richard's horse was killed in battle, another tale claims Saladin sent him 2 fresh mounts, saying it was not fitting for a king to fight on foot. These acts of chivalry, whether entirely true or not, reflect the immense respect each commander had for the other's skill and honor. Ultimately, the Third Crusade ended in a stalemate. Richard was unable to retake Jerusalem, and Saladin was unable to drive the Crusaders completely out of the Levant. In 1192, they signed the Treaty of Jaffa. The treaty was a pragmatic compromise. Saladin retained control of Jerusalem, but he guaranteed that unarmed Christian pilgrims would have safe and free access to their holy sites within the city. The Crusaders were allowed to keep a narrow strip of coastal territory. It was a fitting end to their long struggle, a solution born not of total victory, but of mutual exhaustion and respect. Just a few months after Richard sailed for home, Saladin's own journey came to an end. In March 1193, after a short illness, he died in his beloved city of Damascus. When his treasury was opened to pay for his funeral, his advisors were shocked to find he had almost no personal wealth. Despite ruling a vast and rich empire, he had given away nearly everything he owned to his subjects, to charity and to public works. He lived a simple, pious life and died as he had lived, a servant of his faith and his people. Saladin's legacy is immense and complex. In the Muslim world, he is celebrated as a hero who united a fractured people, restored Jerusalem, and embodied the ideals of a just and pious ruler. In the West, he is remembered as the noble enemy, the chivalrous Saracen, whose honor and mercy were praised even by those he fought against. He was a brilliant military strategist, a shrewd statesman, and a man of deep faith. But perhaps his most enduring legacy is the idea that even in the midst of brutal conflict, it is possible to act with honor, to show mercy, and to respect the humanity of one's adversary. In an age often defined by fanaticism and violence, Saladin stands as a timeless symbol of enlightened leadership and the enduring power of chivalry. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the life of one of history's most fascinating leaders. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to Moments in History channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. We'll see you next time.